Hello everyone, and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is going to be all about Chapter 19, Part 2 of the main campaign of Dragalia Lost. I'm going to share my thoughts and impressions on this new part of Chapter 19, which released just a couple days ago, so full spoilers ahead for the rest of this video for everything that's happened in the main campaign, as well as a few of the relevant side events. I'll start off with some high-level impressions on this part of the chapter. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I love this part of the chapter, and this is the most I think I've enjoyed the main campaign of Dragalia Lost in quite some time. It feels like we've gone through several chapters and chapter halves full of setup, where we were introduced to alts of various characters or Gala Reborn dragons, and there was more of a focus on selling the Gala banners, and it felt like things weren't happening for a reason, really, as far as the main campaign. This chapter, to me, delivered on a lot of the setup. It reminded us of a lot of the different dangling plot threads that are happening out there in the world of Dragalia Lost, and now that the parties have all convened in the Fairy Kingdom and are moving toward the World Tree, I feel like we're finally getting to the climax of this arc of the story. So overall, I really enjoyed this. I think the chapters have been escalating for me in terms of my enjoyment ever since the chapter where rumors were circulating about Yuden actually being the other. And funny enough, that's where this chapter starts off, is us finding out or getting more details on the revelation from the end of Part 1 that Yuden was created from the other's flesh. So the chapter begins with Finlorda explaining how using the combination of fairy magic and the other's flesh, which was retrieved, as we know, from the end of the Dawn of Dragalia event after having fallen into the Fairy Kingdom, using that combination, Finlorda was able to fashion or fabricate an artificial life form to essentially serve as a vessel for the soul of a dearly departed child of his friend King Aurelius. In this explanation to Yuden, he played up the fact that he was doing this out of his own ambition because he wanted more insight into the nature of the royal bloodline, shapeshifting, and how that could be utilized to better fairy society and advance them and take advantage of their metamorphosis capabilities. However, it's later implied that part of this was also the friendship that he shared with Aurelius and also shared with Gatov, so this was probably also kind of a personal deal as opposed to just purely fueled by ambition on Finlorda's part, but he doesn't share that with Yuden because he really wants to shoulder the burden and the blame for this for himself, because this is a pretty big deal and pretty big revelation in the world of Dragalia. All of the rest of the party reacts that this is a profane and unspeakable act and thing to do. Of course, it's Shell once again that kind of speaks up and says, hey, let the man talk, let him finish, we need to figure out why he was doing this. And at some level, it was sort of at the behest of Aurelius and his loss of his son to Wormscale. It's interesting the order in which this happened, right? Because Fairies was exposed to or had Wormscale as well, but he obviously survived. And the fact that the son died, it's a little confusing to me. It makes me unsure of Nedric's true origin, because in a previous segment of this chapter, or maybe in the previous chapter even, I think Jin Lorda talked about a child swap at birth, which to me would indicate that the original 7th Scion was Nedric and he survived and was swapped with the artificial life form Yuden. But the way that this part of the chapter read, it sounded like the baby actually died and essentially Finlorda salvaged the soul and put it into a new body. And the other's flesh being important because if it were just in another type of body, even with the fairy magic to animate it, it would stagnate and not be able to grow or be a host to mana. That's sort of my reading of it. So anyway, we found this out about Yuden, and he actually responded in a pretty mature manner. He had to think about it. It caused him to doubt and reflect on his life experiences, and it is pretty earth-shattering. But I think with everything he's gone through, realizing that he's not a royal, and realizing how the people doubted him and thought he was infused with the other beforehand, he took it in stride, I would say, all things considered. Like, this wasn't a mental breakdown of Yuden, and obviously we had the morale moment soon after where the rest of the party comes in and thanks him for being a leader and says they still want to follow him and so on. But I still think that this was a better reaction than I would have hoped for from Yuden, so I was kind of happy to see about that. While that's happening, we also get some more interesting backstory on Gatov and his interactions with Finlorda. And Finlorda alluded to this, basically said he'd tried this technique in the past to revive somebody and it sort of failed. That seems to be what happened with Sheila, essentially, because she is Gatov's daughter, basically saved, brought back to life, but she isn't able to speak in complete sentences. She's a little bit eerie and inhuman in her characteristics, and if I had to guess, it seems sort of implied that probably that was the first experiment with this type of technique, but maybe not using the other's flesh, and maybe that's why she's ended up the way that she is. So, in any case, we hear more discussion between Gatov and Finlorda, and Finlorda asks Gatov, "Are you thinking about getting the Dawn Shard?" We get a lot of deep lore drops from Finlorda to the rest of the party, including the revised, or the true history versus the revised history of the Ilian Church. So he talks about how what you know in the South is not what really happened. The Dawn Shard, the Sacred Shards, there's a very different understanding of those and meaning of those. He even talks about Mine and Mine's writings and research, and directly alludes to her. And that makes me think that definitely Ilya and Mordecai being out there somewhere is going to play a role in the future. We know Mine's for sure going to play a role because of Fabless Tobias, a character that's coming out. But in general, the Mordecai-Yuden relationship is something that I think could be very, very interesting because they're both sort of an artificial life form with this aspect of the other. Anyway, we get that exposition from Finlorda, but one of the other things that they sort of talk about is the Dawn Shard's ability to make one's dreams or one's desired reality manifest. So of course we've known for a while that Harl's interested in it, Cardinal Grot's interested in it, Nedric's interested in it to reforge his pact or complete his pact with Bahamut, which again gets mentioned in this chapter. And so just all the players coming together around this, just adding the fact that, hey, Gatov, maybe you could get that. You could save Sheila. You could have your reality back to the way that you want it to be. All of these things add a layer of intrigue of who is actually going to get this thing in chapter 20? Who's going to end up with it? What's going to happen? How is that going to warp everybody's storylines? Like, could Gatov betray everybody to get the Dawn Shard for himself? And I'm not saying it's likely it'll happen, but like they set it up in a nice way where it's not super clear what's going to unfold. Another thing that happened, of course, was Shell talked to Finlorda and asked for some of his support as far as fairy magic, restoring the body of Mascula as a remote unit to Laxi. So his heart is still encompassed in her body, but they're able to operate Mascula remotely. I think that's a super nice solution because a lot of their development was around their relationship together and being housed together in one body. So it is cool that that still exists while having the mobile unit, which certainly means we're able to get a Gala Mascula ult. So a lot of you in the comments have been clamoring for that for several months at this point, and it seems like it's going to become a reality. I have to think after this chapter that Mascula is the ult, and even though they didn't get a lot of screen time, I liked that Mascula and Laxi were the characters that were the last ones to sort of talk to Yuden about his dilemma, because they probably can relate to the feeling of being an artificial being and still feeling a sense of purpose and inclusion and feeling validated by their maestro, by Yuden, in their own hopes, dreams, ambitions, goals, etc., to where they are androids, but they're humane. They're relatable, right? They're just like everybody else in the party, and I think that they kind of give Yuden that reassurance he is as well. So he decides to embark upon the World Tree to receive a message left there as sort of a memory by his father, King Aurelius. So that's where he's headed, but in the midst of that, androids are attacking them. We also find out that Valix, Zethia, Jin Lorda, and Nedric are also encroaching upon the World Tree and trying to summon it, trying to get to the Dawn Shard, and they've actually unleashed an attack. and there are rebellions happening across the kingdom. Knowing that Jinlord is away, there's different factions in the fairy kingdom wanting progress versus wanting continuity of tradition, and that occupies Finlorda, making it so that he has to stay back and take care of it. So our party in the end agrees to go toward the World Tree, but so much else happened in this chapter. Like, I'm sure I'm forgetting something, so please let me know in the comments below. Like, we got more about Ferris, we got more discussion about Baron, like how in the world was Baron able to absorb Morsayati? What does that say about who Baron is and who Ferris is? There was some kind of epithet alluded to about Ferris being the progenitor, which obviously we have the Genesis worm, Bahamut, but progenitor kind of has a similar connotation, so who knows exactly where they fall in the lore of Dragalia Lost. But all in all, this was just a really good chapter, in my opinion. I really liked it. I liked how all of these other little things are coming back in. And did I mention Tartarus, by the way? Because at the end of the chapter, we get this Tartarus moment where we're trying to go to the World Tree. He comes in, he intervenes. I just love Tartarus's vocabulary, the way that he talks about King Aurelius, and I think y'all put it well in the comments. I tried to express this in a previous video, but I think I said something like, Nedric's masks unleash their power but cause madness. I think the way that y'all explained it that's better than what I originally said is it's more like these masks that give them their Agito powers amplify their madness, amplify the obsessions they already have to drive them to the point that their logic doesn't even check out. What they're saying doesn't really make sense, but it's so obsessive and so consuming of their personality, and you see that in Tartarus. He's all about Aurelius and oblation to Aurelius, and I just love the way that he expresses himself. The fact that when we beat him, he's not flustered, it's not like he even lost. His only response is just idiocy, and he just like can't be bothered to deal with our party. I just think he has such a cool design. I love the fact that he's just randomly a dragon when all the other Agito are different races and he's a dragon, and I was glad we finally got a little bit more on him, his singular belief in his king, and I think he even uses a Latin phrase like sui generis or something like that as the ruler of the world, and the world not being worth really existing without its ruler. Is just crazy in a really cool way. Like, I like these villains, and so that's one of the things that's been driving me to enjoy the story as well, despite, you know, some of the gala advertising and just some of the random shenanigans that'll happen in the campaign. Overall, though, I'm really excited. I think that we have tie-ins for Ferris and Baron. We have Ilya and Mordecai likely to become relevant, and we know in side chapters that they've met with Leonidas and they were headed north toward the World Tree, so he could even show up potentially, although he is trying to rule in South Grastia right now and take care of everything down there. We had some moments with like Valix and Zethia too. So overall, this was just a great chapter in my opinion. Looking forward to the next one. It could be another setup chapter again next time around, where they'll maybe save a lot of the explosive stuff for part 2. But I'm here for it. I've been enjoying the main campaign as of late, and hopefully y'all have too. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. Let me know what you think about Nedric's origin as well, because I feel still a bit fuzzy on that, like I said. Like, I thought they were swapped at birth based on previous chapters, but now it sounds like Yuden just died, or the soul of the 7th Scion just died and was transferred into Yuden's body using the other's flesh and fairy magic. So let me know if I'm off on that and who Nedric really is, what your theories are for what's going to happen next in the campaign. That is going to do it for today, everyone. Thank you as always for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.